for Good, we've talked a lot about blockchain technology, running ICOs, all sorts of different things, building ideas. But today we're talking about using this awesome technology to improve the world. And so we've got some pretty awesome speakers. I will go ahead and just let them introduce themselves. The format will generally be they each get 10 minutes to talk about their work and what they're doing, and then we'll have Q&A. So what's really nice is we've got this little chat window here, so anyone just feel free to type in your questions, and directed or not, and we can address them. And this will also be recorded, so anyone who is unable to make this time, they're able to view this later. So without further ado, let me hand it over to Anne Connelly.
Amazing. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Pretty excited about this. So to give you a bit of info on my background, I got my start in my career in humanitarian aid. So I was working for Doctors Without Borders for a number of years. I lived in the Central African Republic and DR Congo. And I think when I started to learn about Bitcoin back in 2012, it was really, I could see all the immediate use cases of cryptocurrency in all of these developing countries where I had worked. And I think one of the earliest use cases that I was so excited about was when I had worked in Central Africa, we, of course, were working with an unbanked population. And so we were paying all of our staff in cash every month. And so we had to get the cash from capital city all the way to the most remote places in Africa to pay these people. And I think when people in the blockchain world talk about these unbanked populations, and they don't actually think about the practicalities of what that looks like. And so for us, we were carrying thousands of dollars worth of cash on our backs through military checkpoints, insecure locations, and then storing it on site, putting us at risk for theft and kidnapping and all that kinds of things. So for me, the very, very first use case I thought of was just being able to send the money digitally to all of our staff, which would actually reduce the number of kidnappings that we had, the number of robberies, and it would also actually reduce the war and the fighting that we would see in the area, because anytime a guerrilla group was able to rob money off of an NGO or an aid group, they would use that to fund their cause and buy weapons and buy food and that type of thing. So that was how I first got into the space, and I have been working in it full-time since 2015 for a number of companies, and my passion very much is around the intersection of blockchain and social good as a result. So I wanted to talk today a little bit about how we're going to see blockchain intersecting with international development and humanitarian aid. And the way that I kind of look at it is that you can see the benefits of blockchain both from the prevention side as well as from the treatment side. So looking at how is blockchain technology going to prevent a lot of the issues that we're trying to deal with as an aid sector, and then how is it going to support what we're doing to try and treat a lot of these issues. So I mean, first and foremost, when you're looking on the prevention side, if you look at just the pure ability of digital funds and government-free funds is going to enable significant wealth growth in countries where they simply can't count on their governments to be providing that sort of stability. So looking at places like Zimbabwe and Venezuela, I actually saw a video last night about people in Venezuela are making they're making arts and crafts out of their bills because the bills are worth absolutely nothing. So just having government-free money is going to help a lot of these people get out of poverty. And so the same thing also applies to remittances. If people are able to send money overseas for much cheaper, then it's going to enable them to spend more of these dollars on food and surgery and healthcare and that type of thing to actually pull people out of poverty. But where I think we're going to see the greatest advancements in sort of anti-poverty as a result of blockchain is going to be in and around two things. The first is corruption reduction. Corruption is one of the biggest issues that prevents countries and populations from moving forward and being able to grow. And so if we're able to, at the very least, be able to track aid dollars through governments and see where they're going and where we can at least see the trickle down as much as possible, I think that's going to help massive amounts in ensuring that the money is going to where it's supposed to be going. The second one, in and around the prevention side, is enabling people all around the world to join the global economy. So a really good example of this is this incredible organization called Code to Inspire. If you haven't heard of it, I would recommend checking it out. So this is an organization that was started in Afghanistan that teaches girls in Afghanistan how to code, and then sets them up with work that they can do, and then they can get paid in Bitcoin. And this is absolutely incredible because girls would never be able to get jobs in Afghanistan doing this type of work. And if they did and they got paid, the money would often be confiscated. So it enables them to have a livelihood in a way that has never been possible before. So these are some of the ways that I really see blockchain having an impact on the crime prevention side of things. Now, of course, we can't prevent everything, and I think there's always going to be a market for international aid and development. And so when you look at blockchain in terms of trying to support that industry in helping others around the world, we're going to see it in a few ways. I think there's a lot of talk out there about donation tracking. I think there's limits to the benefit of that, but it will help in certain smaller ways and being able to connect donors with the recipients. But I think one of the bigger ways it's going to actually impact is in the area of supply chain. So when you really think about it, these international aid organizations are shipping billions of dollars of goods all over the world. And it's not necessarily goods for donation, it's goods that are going to help these organizations work. So it's medication, it's logistical supplies, it's food products, all these types of things. And so what I'm really hoping is that blockchain technology is going to just streamline that whole process and ensure that all the goods that have actually been purchased with these donor dollars are getting to the places that they need to get. Now, my greatest excitement, I'll wrap up quickly because I'm running out of time here, but my greatest excitement about blockchain really in this industry is not so much that it's going to be really making these things 10% better, so this idea of streamlining supply chain and that, it's that it's going to be breaking down the silos between the organizations that are working in a lot of these places. So through the sharing of data, through the sharing of supply chains, you're going to be able to actually achieve much more. So let's say that there's a crisis in Congo and MSF is there, but they don't have a particular set of logistical supplies. However, UNICEF is there. UNICEF has those supplies nearby, and MSF will be able to see these types of things because the data is open. That's where I think we're going to see a lot more of the greater impact is by the breaking down of silos as well. So I think those are the main points that I want to talk about today. Let me just open the chat and see if there's anything there. But yeah, those are my thoughts.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Anne. And actually for questions, if I could ask everyone to just kind of hold them until the end, and then we'll get all of them. And you can do directed ones as well. But Fed, you're up.
Good. Thank you, Audrey. So my name is Federico. I am from Buenos Aires, Argentina. I studied economics at the university. Then I studied philosophy. Then I work in the online media in a very big company in Argentina, the most important newspaper in the region. And then I was an entrepreneur in online media. And then so that got me connected to innovation because I was working in the business section, right? And innovation, entrepreneurs, startups. So that's how I got connected to the blockchain. I guess the first time, I think it was like 2012 or 2013. And so since I am from Argentina, so emerging economies, I had always had to live with very poor institutions. You know, Argentina was one of the countries that had hyperinflation in 1989, 1991 again, and so a story of very bad governance. So that's how I started to focus on, okay, so how to change this, right? How can we use blockchain to produce better institutions for emerging economies? And lots of people were already focusing on using blockchain for voting systems and how to improve voting and make it more secure, more transparent. But very few people were actually taking a look at another very important piece of institution that are the justice system, right? Courts in emerging economies are usually very, very slow, very expensive, and people don't really have access to that, right? So I developed a concept that is called crowd jury. So it's the use of collective intelligence and blockchain to transform how justice is served in our societies, right? And so I started to do research on that, and there is also a problem, right? The economy is starting to change a lot in the recent years, because of globalization, digitalization. And now you have these different disputes that you didn't have before, right? For example, I am in Buenos Aires and I may hire some guy from another country, maybe from, Anne was mentioning Zimbabwe, maybe Zimbabwe, to build some software for me, right? And imagine we make an agreement for this guy to do a website for me. And so if there is something wrong with this, so maybe there's a dispute with this guy, I'm not going to Zimbabwe to find a lawyer and go to court against this guy for like a $1,000 dispute, right? So imagine if we could, instead of paying the guy directly, I could put the money into a smart contract. So if everything goes right, money is transferred to the contractor and everybody's happy. But if there is a dispute, so the money will stay locked there, and a jury of experts in websites is going to be selected randomly with a very, very specific method that we can discuss later if you want. And these guys are going to analyze the evidence and vote on who is right. So this gives the guy of Zimbabwe the possibility of starting to work for companies from different countries, right? Because now the customer has the possibility of hiring him and having good institutions that make sure that this is going to work as he intended it. So the name of the company, so the concept of this distributed justice is called the crowd jury, and the company is called Kleros, K-L-E-R-O-S. It comes from the Greek word chance, because this is how the jurors were selected in ancient Athens. They use a very sophisticated system of random selection that we can discuss if you want. But so what I see is that since lots of countries in the world have very poor institutions and very poor governance, blockchain can provide to these countries different way of solving disputes, in my case. And so this tends to give the small guy, the guy who wants to work for the rest of the world, a possibility of having access to this world market. So that's the project in a nutshell. Then I'm going to take as many questions as you want.
Okay. Thanks so much. And then finally, originally we said we were going to have Tony, but he's off in Wyoming passing utility bill or utility token legislation. So we've got Dan as partner here to talk to us about Airways.
Yeah. So Tony was bummed he couldn't be here, but it's interesting things going on in Wyoming. But Audrey, thanks for having us, and also thanks to Anne and Federico. I think both of their presentations kind of set the stage for what Airways is working on. So high level, Airways is we're a blockchain company. We're building a platform to bring diversified financial services to emerging markets. And as part of that, we have an initial launch partner, which is Juvo. And I don't know if any of you know about Juvo or what they do, but they're essentially a airtime lending solution for carriers globally. So they're partnered with cell phone carriers in over 31 countries across the world. And what they do basically in a nutshell is not to get too much into their business, but they've kind of made the bet that if you can reach somebody at the point of need, so say it's Friday night and they run out of airtime, what Juvo will do is proactively reach out to this individual and say, hey, we can give you 24 hours of free airtime. If you want this deal, then just say yes. And what happens is this person gets 24 hours of airtime, and the next time they go back to the top-up station to top up their airtime on their phone, they just repay the loan. There's no interest, and it's basically just a bridge so that they keep their service on. And obviously this has all kinds of other very positive downstream implications. So they're a launch partner, and what we're doing is basically helping them create a system that will allow them to tokenize airtime. So at a high level, The platform is a tokenization exchange that allows companies like Juvo, who have these large constituencies of people in emerging economies, to tokenize their real world soft assets. So soft assets being something like airtime minutes or energy credits in some countries work that way. And as you can imagine, this has a lot of implications, not just for the end user, but also for the local microeconomies where these users live. We can effectively increase the fluidity and the trajectory of how capital is consumed and spent and shared. You can envision that if somebody were to have a bunch of tokens sitting on their phone for airtime, those now become portable. So one of the big issues, and you know, Anne kind of touched on this, is throughout the supply chain in emerging countries, this problem of cash liquidity is a huge issue. So the use case specific to the telco industry is that if I own a little grocery store and I sell SIM cards and allow people to top up their airtime at my grocery store, I have to go in the morning with my giant bundle of cash and purchase all of the airtime that I think I can sell that day. And if I run out of airtime during the day, that means I either can't sell any more airtime during the day, or I have to go back to the store with more cash and buy more airtime that I can then sell to my customers. So this creates a lot of problems because there's obviously a lot of cash moving back and forth. There's really no liquidity in this system. But with a system where airtime is now tokenized and individuals use blockchain-based tokens to exchange and pay for airtime, you can envision a scenario where somebody walks into a store, and if they have extra airtime tokens sitting on their phone, they can use them to pay for goods and services from that merchant. And now this merchant who holds these tokens that he just received for payment can then turn around and sell the airtime tokens to the next consumer that walks into the store. So you start to build an economy from a very grassroots level where individuals are exchanging these airtime tokens. And we have a pretty good, you know, we're making the bet that people will behave this way, and a lot of that is predicated on the way that Juvo has seen their customers behave today, which is, you know, you could have a situation where somebody will walk into a store, they'll hand their phone to the clerk physically, and the clerk will actually make a phone call on the person's phone for, you know, 5 minutes or whatever the approximate value of airtime is, and the individual will walk out of the store with goods and services. So in a way, there's already this gray economy that's leveraging airtime as a means of payment. What our system does is basically formalizes that existing behavior. So that's kind of our initial market entry strategy. So telco is definitely kind of our first use case in terms of what Airways is doing. So we help companies like Juvo set up these systems to go to market and tokenize their soft assets. Now, our core product is what we call the Airways Network Exchange, which opens up effectively the entire blockchain to individuals on networks like Juvo's customers. And the way we do this is, if you think about much in the same way that a blockchain, like a cryptocurrency exchange would work, so maybe a Binance or a KU, they both have their coins where people are offered discounts for using the native coin of the exchange to facilitate the exchange between two different cryptocurrencies. So that's, at a high level, that's how they work. And our system would work in a very similar way, in that if somebody wants to, like, let's say they take an airtime loan for $5 and they pay that back, and then Juvo starts extending them bigger and bigger loans, maybe graduating them up to a handset loan. You know, so now they have this Android handset and they can access a whole bunch of different services through the Airways platform. So on the one side, we have all of these customers in emerging markets. And on the other side, we have select blockchain projects that we will partner with that will act as service providers on our network. So you can imagine, you know, there's different projects out there right now in the world of decentralized insurance products, decentralized investment products, and decentralized lending, and the list goes on and on. So effectively, we will partner with these different blockchain projects and be able to exchange their tokens through our Airways exchange with consumers on the other end. So if you have airtime tokens sitting in your wallet and you want to basically convert them to some sort of blockchain investment product, you can do that through the exchange. If you want to buy some sort of decentralized just-in-time health insurance, you can do that through the platform. And really, the possibilities are endless, but in terms of affecting change in a more near-term way, we're definitely focused on the telco use case and the mobile phone use case, and that's how we plan to go to market in the next year. Beyond that, we've got a couple year product roadmap that maps, that kind of puts us on that trajectory towards bringing all the other blockchain projects as they come to maturity into our network. But initially, we're looking to tokenize airtime and increase the liquidity and flow of capital in emerging markets.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. So now we can open it up to questions. I think we have a small enough group that you can just go ahead and start your video and just ask it. Well, I see one in chat already. Rochelle, feel free to ask, or else I can ask on your behalf if you can't get video for some reason. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and read it. So this question is from Rochelle for everyone, or actually the question is for Anne. You mentioned remittance. What do you think are the challenges with mass adoption of blockchain-based remittance technology? There are already a number of remittance projects currently. Is there something you tried, something you find sorely lacking in these projects, if any?
Yeah, I think from the remittance standpoint, there are two big issues. The first is always the last mile. So the kind of concept around that is if you can get any product of any kind 99% of the way to its destination, but you can't get it that last mile, that it's not worth doing at all. So it's the same concept where if you can buy Bitcoin in North America and get it in a wallet and send it to another wallet, and you can't convert it to local currency in, say, Congo or Malawi, then it's useless. And so that's kind of one of the biggest issues around that, is ensuring that there's good offloading systems that transfer Bitcoin to fiat in a lot of these locations. So that's one issue. Now, that being said, you can still buy, you can still use like a local Bitcoins, but you have to have someone that's willing to buy. Like when you look at Zimbabwe, Bitcoin sells on local Bitcoins and some of the exchanges at a $2,000 premium often, because nobody wants to actually trade it for Zimbabwean currency. Well, they don't have Zimbabwean currency anymore. But anyway, so that's one of the biggest issues. The second issue is actually internet, and having the cost of internet being prohibitively high to be making these types of transactions. So for a lot of people, to be able to conduct regular transfers on the internet is it's too expensive. And so I think when we see the cost of and access of internet drop, and then we see more offloading points, that will be good, or at least see more people adopting and accepting Bitcoin for the ability for people to actually buy real things with their Bitcoin. Then I think we're going to see a much greater adoption, particularly in rural areas.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Malika, would you like to ask your questions live? And if not, I'll just start reading them again. But just to switch it up a little, I'll start with Fed. So does Claros, the jury participants, get paid?
Yes, of course. So when I do the agreement with the guy from Zimbabwe about this website contract, so we both agree to use Claros as arbitrator in case a dispute happens, and that contract will have the amount to be paid in case the dispute happens effectively. So the dispute starts, and we have to deposit the amount of money for it to go to arbitration, right? If one of us does not deposit that money, automatically loses the dispute. So that's the money that's going to be paid to the jurors who are going to arbitrate the dispute, and of course they are going to be paid. So they're going to receive two types of income. One of the income comes from the ETH that is paid by the parties, and then there is a token that makes sure that the juries are going to make honest work. What's the problem here? Jurors are anonymous, right? And so the problem we could have is that they are going to just look at, not really take a look at the evidence and just vote randomly and try to collect the arbitration fee for doing nothing. So there is a system token that's called Pinakion that is going to, if you vote in a way that it's not honest, and you vote because you vote incoherently with the rest of the jurors, you're going to lose that token. And if you vote like the rest, you're going to have the token, you keep the token, right? So the jurors are going to be paid in two ways, with the ETH as arbitrator fee, and then they are going to be paid in this token.
Awesome. So Malika's microphone has an issue, so I'll just go ahead and read the other two of her questions. So for Daniel, does Airways use its own token?
Yeah. Sorry if I was unclear about that. So our Airways exchange that facilitates the exchange of airtime tokens to other types of cryptocurrency product tokens, that exchange is facilitated by the Airways token. So that's how we can ensure that the consumer on, in market does not have to deal with all of the blockchain stuff, right? That all the craziness that we deal with when we try to work with cryptocurrencies. Obviously that user experience does not lend itself well to somebody in the emerging market. So yeah, we have our own token that helps facilitate those exchanges.
Cool, thank you. And then now back to Anne. How do girl coders in Afghanistan who've been paid via blockchain get their earnings back in their own currency?
Yeah, so I'm not sure how they do it right now, whether or not Afghanistan has access to an exchange. I mean, hypothetically, the organization itself could set up a Bitcoin ATM of some kind in their office. The neat thing too is if you're using companies like purse.io, you can actually order stuff with Bitcoin on Amazon. So essentially how it works is that you will put a wish list in your Amazon, someone else will buy it with money, you send them Bitcoin, and you can get it at a bit of a discount, or if you're the one actually doing the purchasing, you can do quite well with that. But so those are some of the ways, but again, it's going to be a case of what I see often in the blockchain space, where there's all these great ideas and they're all going to be absolutely incredible once the world is operating a little more smoothly with Bitcoin, so people can actually start to spend it. So it's a concern at this stage, but I think it's something that'll change over time.
Thank you. Juan Carlos, you have a question. Would you like to ask it directly? Man, nobody on video today. Okay, so this question is for Fed. How scalable is the process of getting juries? What happens if you get thousands of lawsuits at the same time?
So the process is, Kleros is built on Ethereum, right? So I guess the bottleneck is Ethereum scalability. At this point, Ethereum is not very scalable because of the intrinsic technical limitations of the network. But as different solutions start to come up, so it's going to be more scalable and it's going to handle thousands of disputes at the same time. So if Ethereum proves to be scalable and works at very high critical mass, so Kleros should also work perfectly, and so that should not be a problem.
Awesome, thank you. If there's more questions, feel free to just hop in or type in the chat. But if there aren't for now, I'll go ahead and ask a couple to the panel and everybody. Oh, okay, there is a follow-on question. So for Anne, in your experience, how is blockchain being used on social impact investment funds?
Yeah, so one of the neatest things that's coming out soon, if not that's already started, is using smart contracts for pay for success type models of impact investment. So for example, if you wanted to fund a particular project but had to have them meet certain milestones to unlock different stages of funding, you can use smart contracts for that, which is really neat, so that the organization knows that the money is all they have to do is complete the task to unlock it. It keeps things nice and clean for everybody. So that's one way that it's being used. I think one of the neatest ways too is in and around access to data with impact investment. So trying to increase the data that's available that feeds into these impact investment funds, so that they know what they're funding. So those are a couple of the ways. And I think really one of the biggest pieces we're going to see that's going to grow in the future is in and around social impact bonds and reducing the cost of evaluation for them. Right now, social impact bonds are almost in most cases not worth doing because the cost of trying to evaluate whether the project has been done is just too much. It's not worth it. It's more than the cost of the bond itself. And so when we see blockchain technology and things like crowdsourcing responses on whether something was finished or not finished, and having more trust in that process, I think it'll drive down the cost of evaluation of social impact bonds and will enable more of those to go through.
Awesome, thank you. Everyone continue to type your questions or jump in, but this question is for the panel. Blockchain moves at the speed of basically blockchain. So really quickly, there's a lot of developments happening. Are there particular areas or technologies that you are really excited about as it relates to blockchain for, improving the world, social impact, et cetera? And anyone just feel free to jump in.
Yeah, I'll jump in. This is Dan. Yeah, so I think, kind of in line with what we're looking to do, one of the areas that I think is starting to gain a lot more focus and really deserves a lot more focus is really the user experience and how real world people actually interact with the blockchain, right? It's one thing for a bunch of tech geeks or people who are savvy in the space to be able to work with the technology and try to use it on a day-to-day basis. But when you introduce it to people in the form of a product that have never, maybe that almost don't even know how to navigate through a modern smartphone, the UX becomes so much more important. And I think we can probably all agree, having been in the space for a little while, that it's driven by engineers, a lot of the decision making and a lot of the early prototype interfaces we see. So I'm looking forward. My personal background, which I neglected to give early on, I kind of come out of the product and design world. So looking at it through that lens, it's still very, very early days in terms of building products that real people can use every day. And I'm looking forward, I think, in the next year or two to seeing a lot of those projects that really have that kind of emphasis take hold, because that's really what's going to unlock everything.
I like being born and raised in an emerging economy. So I guess for me it was easier to see the use cases of blockchain maybe earlier than people in the developed world, because as I told you, Argentina had a problem of hyperinflation, and in 2001 all the banks took our money and stole it. So yeah, and having honest money and having the money secured by network of computers spread around the world may be more interesting than having it inside banks in an emerging economy which are poorly regulated, right? So many times I had discussions with people from maybe from the US, and I was pitching Bitcoin to them, and they were telling me, yeah, okay, but what? I have PayPal, so what? Who cares about Bitcoin? So, and I was telling him, so, you know what? I live in Argentina, and the government does not let us send money abroad because of imbalances in the current account. So people from the emerging economies usually see they don't really know what is blockchain, but if you tell them what the blockchain can achieve for them, so they are going to sign up for that very quickly.
I think for me, the one I'm most excited about is looking at how blockchain can actually disintermediate the charitable market and services that we've had for a long time. So a really good example is a company called, an organization called Unsung. They're based, they have a Toronto office, but they're based out of the United States. And they, essentially their goal is to connect people who have extra food with people who need food. So the goal is to disintermediate the food bank through decentralized channels. And I think that's really where we're going to see the greatest impact, is not through kind of the improvement of our current and existing systems, whether it's supply chain for NGOs, that type of thing, but to actually totally change the way that we provide help and provide social systems for our communities and our societies.
Cool, I love that. Having had a food startup in the past, I know there's a lot of food waste, and if we could just redistribute that and get that to people who need it, that would be amazing. So we have a few more questions from people. So here's one from Megan, and this is, I think, for everyone. Where do you think nonprofits should start, or resources they should look into if they want to incorporate blockchain in their donation structure?
Talk to me. I set up a Bitcoin donation program at an organization. I'd started in 2013, couldn't get them convinced to do it until 2014. And I work with a number of charities now trying to get that started. I think one of the greatest challenges that you're going to see in terms of setting up one of these donation systems is honestly just the culture of the organization and trying to convince leadership that it's a good idea to do. I would definitely recommend talking to a few people that have done it before, looking at which organizations accept it, and trying to create an air of credibility around it by finding good organizations that already do it to help the leadership of your organization feel comfortable with it. That's going to be your greatest challenge. And then I would take a look at whether you want to actually be accepting the crypto itself or be converting that before you accept it. And that'll be a key decision that you'll want to be making. So I would take a look. To be honest, I'm not sure what resources are actually out there, but if you want to have a chat about it, just feel free to get in touch with me.
Awesome. This one may be a little off topic, but John from Peru is working on mining. And, you know, he wants to, I guess, talk more about that. And I guess if any of you are doing that, let him know. But I guess while we have the question, is there anything around mining that you think would be applicable to, you know, kind of blockchain for good?
One project that I saw very recently was that UNICEF was asking people to donate mining power on their computers to mine Ethereum that would then get donated to UNICEF. So I thought that was a clever way to kind of rejig the way organizations do fundraising and think about fundraising, and actually ask people to donate something that doesn't really cost them anything. And so that was a neat project that I'd keep an eye out for.
Cool. This question is for Fed. How do Claros users make their case to the jury? Where is their evidence shared or stored?
So in the early use cases that we are studying now and starting to test, so basically, so there is an agreement between the parties. And so imagine the website and the contract. So all of this is going to be stored in a box, right, in IPFS, and it's going to be hashed on the blockchain, and the jurors are going to analyze that evidence. So there are no more information going to enter into the system after the dispute starts. So it's going to be, the analysis will be run on existing evidence. So after, in a later stage, we will actually, start to make parties interact with jurors and answer questions. But for now, we are just trying to tackle the simplest disputes, so it doesn't get too much complicated at this very early stage, because this is, remember, very early stage technology, and we have to go step by step.
Great. This question is for Dan. How will Airways handle price fluctuation of its tokens? Does it need to reach a level of price stability to be completely effective?
Yeah, this is always a fun one. So in the system I described, where we have an airtime token and then a separate Airways network token and then the rest of the blockchain, just to kind of segment those out. So the airtime token in this case is a token that represents an equivalent amount of real world asset that's backed by an independent entity, right? Which in this case is Juvo and its carrier parks, right? So basically the way the airtime token works is they will always redeem a set amount of airtime for $1 of local fiat currency. So in a way, they are centrally controlling the token supply and what the token can be exchanged for. So that one, the airtime token really won't fluctuate because it'll always be worth a set amount of airtime. So that part of the ecosystem, whether it's Juvo with airtime tokens or maybe a power company with energy tokens, they will always be able to fix the price of the token without any kind of fancy, stable coin manipulation or anything like that. Now the Airways token, much in the same way that the exchange tokens work that we know of today, it will fluctuate. It's purely a utility token. It's not a security. So that will freely float and really that will just exist in its, on its own, and it will be required for interactions on the network. So basically, the service providers and the other blockchains that are providing services to consumers, they'll effectively have to hold the Airways tokens and use those when they have transactions occurring on the network.
Awesome. We have another question for Dan. So can you explain the process, how you created the token? It seems you had to do several alliances in order to create this economy based on internet balance trading. Can the model be easily scaled to other countries in case you need to do so many partners?
Yeah, so that's multi-part. So let me see. Yeah, so creating token. So the Airways network, we're launching on Stellar. So it's pretty, from a engineering standpoint, it's pretty trivial to launch your own token on the Stellar network. So that's that part of it. And in terms of alliances, yeah, so this is, our platform is an ecosystem, right? And we have our launch partner with the use case in the telco space. Like I said, that can be expanded as we grow. And the model, yeah, because Juvo already has carrier relationships in 31 countries across the world, it by nature, we are, on day one of launch, we'll already be scaling cross-border and, more importantly, cross-carrier within these different countries. And that's something that's kind of a challenge today. And, a lot of the other startup blockchain projects that you see don't necessarily have those relationships in place. So for us, Juvo is really a strategic partner because they've been nurturing and forging those relationships for a few years now. So that's really what they bring to the table.
Awesome, thank you. If others have questions, please go ahead and type them in the chat. But I wanted to ask another one of the panel. Given, there's a lot of, well, you may have seen articles on things like Crypto Bros, things like BTC Miami, having the after party a strip club, all these, Bitcoin's only for rich people type of thing. One, do you have a comment on the culture as it stands today in blockchain, and how do we build a world, that we all actually want to live in?
I would say from a cultural standpoint, yeah, there certainly is a primarily male community, and there have been a lot of issues in it. What I would say is that the community itself is actively trying to become more diverse, I think much more quickly than a lot of industries have. So when you see conferences and events like Consensus, they try to have 40% women on their panels. And so while I'm not super pleased with where everything is right now, I do see genuine will to change. And so I think that's a good thing.
Remember that, this is very early stage of the industry. All industries where there is technology change tend to have bubbles. It happened in the internet in the 90s. And when you have bubbles and you have so many opportunities to make so much money in so short period of time, so this tends to attract the wrong kind of people to this industry, right? It happens in the internet, it happened in Wall Street in the subprime time. So it surely will happen in blockchain. So I guess what's going to happen is that what is being built that has value will stay. And so some people will make money, some people will lose money, but in the end, as the internet, so we will have some very important projects that will have a lot of success, and these guys are going to change the world, as Google and Amazon and others changed the world in the time of the first internet, right? So, and it is beyond doubt that these companies have made tons of good things for mankind. And I guess this bad culture and this bubble is the price to pay for, I guess, for progress in some way.
Yeah, and then I would also say that one of the things that initially got me really excited when I started getting into the space was that the blockchain and the technology was not invented in Silicon Valley. right? And that was, you know, compared to a lot of the other revolutions we've had, from the internet to mobile and so on, that was one of the things that really stood out to me. So, you know, while I think a lot of the East Coast-based media coverage focuses on that aspect of the space, I don't know that, not to say that this stuff isn't happening, because obviously it is, but there's always a little bit of a Wall Street jealousy factor, especially now that blockchain is really encroaching in the financial sector and the fintech space. So there's definitely some bias there, which I think we should, as a community, we should probably call out. But, you know, that said, and to kind of echo, you know, what Anne had said, I think more women in the space is something that's wanted by most people that I talk to, and more diversity in terms of, you know, project founders. And I think we're seeing that, and that kind of stuff doesn't necessarily always get the headlines. It doesn't, you know, satisfy clickbait criteria. But, you know, I think, you know, like Anne said, the fact that the community itself is aware of the problem, and that we're conscious about it, and we're actively, you know, making an effort to improve that, I think sets the space apart from a lot of the other industries that have these similar kind of problems.
Let me add something here. So remember, we are building open source software, right? And we are not actually building companies. We're building cooperatives in some way, right?
Yeah.
So I guess that the people who are creating the most value into this ecosystem, so they tend to be very helpful people and very cooperative people. In my experience, you don't have like this, like kind of, in general, of course I have to clarify, you don't have this kind of profile of like the Wolf of Wall Street type of guy. So this is much more cooperative than the ultra competitive landscape of like Wall Street or the traditional Silicon Valley. So it's a very nice industry to be in, and I think that we are all building something together. So that's nice.
Well, that's a really nice way to leave it off. If there's any more last minute questions, get them in now. Otherwise, we are going to wrap up. And I want to thank the speaker so much for an amazing talk. And I'll just give you like some virtual claps. So thanks, everyone. And this will be recorded. Well, it is being recorded. So I'll share the link after we hop off. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Audrey. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.